Welcome to the Decent People Podcast, a production of Decentral Media, where we're committed to telling the stories of the founders, builders, and visionaries who are creating a new decentralized economy and internet experience. You guys know it as Web3 or blockchain, and we're going to bring you the smartest and most interesting people in the space for intimate conversations that reveal their background, how they got into crypto in the first place, and what they're doing today to make a decentralized future a reality. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to check out our site at decentral.io. Now, to the show. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Decent People Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weissing, and we are joined today by Kirill Gertman, who is the founder of Conduit, which is a DeFi platform that allows users to plug into higher yielding assets all in one place. Kirill was born in the Ukraine and has spent a lot of his life all around different parts of the world. It's great to have you here, Kirill. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing pretty well. And there was a pretty apt description of what we do in my life in a very short couple of sentences, which is cool. But yes, doing pretty well, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So first off, I had to ask, do you still have family in Ukraine?
I don't have very close family there anymore. My grandparents, who were the ones who kind of left, who stayed there as we left, they've passed away since, and so I don't have close family. But I do have more distant relatives and friends, and we actually have employees of Conduit that are there now, and hopefully, like, everyone's okay so far, at least. So hopefully they'll continue to be okay.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Well, I believe when you were born in Ukraine, it was still part of the USSR. Is that correct?
That's right. So you're gonna date me there, or I guess I can date myself. But that's
you and me both, man. I remember when the Berlin Wall fell, so it's okay. You're among friends.
Yeah, that's kind of maybe not rare these days, but people don't seem to recall this. But yes, when I was born in Ukraine, it was called the Ukrainian SSR, which is like the Socialist Republic, right, of USSR. And I think the first 10 years of my life, right, we spent there. So it was a very different place than it is today, obviously.
What part of the country were you born in?
So the city where I'm from is Kharkov, which is it's actually on the sort of northeastern side of the country, and it is one of the cities that's been invaded by Russian forces recently.
Yeah. And what were your impressions of it? What you said, you were about 9 or 10 before you left?
It's a pretty industrial city, I have to say. Like, maybe a good American analogy would be Pittsburgh or a place like that, right? That had a lot of sort of heavy industry in back in the day. I don't think that's the case anymore, but back in the day, and so you kind of think about concrete buildings, things like that, factories. But I enjoyed my childhood, right? I think I had a kind of really great time when I was a kid, and back then it was a very safe place. I could kind of go and ride my bike and not worry about a thing in the world. So I remember it fondly.
Yeah, that's great. Did you have brothers and sisters?
No, I'm actually an only child.
Okay. And what were your mom and dad doing?
So my mom, she was a teacher biology, and my dad, it's interesting because he was part of the reason why I got into sort of computers and related engineering related things. He was working for I'm thinking, how would it be called in English? Essentially a statistics center. So he was doing a bunch of statistics and working on, I think, what would be called the mainframe, but back then there was kind of the only kind of computer that was available, right? You had punch cards and all these sort of things, yeah. And that's how I got a little bit of a taste, I guess, a little bit of introductions into the world of computers in general, I guess.
Yeah, when my dad started at the Jet Propulsion Lab here in Los Angeles in the late 60s, the first programs they were doing were all punch card programs. So yep. Yeah, these mainframes, they took up like 3/4 of the room. They were enormous.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I remember he would bring these punch card home, like, as a kid, I would just like draw on them or like make little things with them, and I still remember these little cardboard things with holes. So yeah.
yeah. Um, and then why did you guys leave Ukraine? Was it was it still part of the USSR at that point?
It was actually right at the point where it was sort of breaking up, and which was probably the reason why we left, right? So it's an experience that I think not a lot of people in the West can relate to, because like you essentially have the country that's breaking apart around you, right? And not even like, and you don't even think about this in the grand political sense. You just think like social kind of services stop working, right? Police are not getting paid for like months, and so they don't show up on the streets anymore, right? That kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so we thought, okay, I guess my parents thought, I was still a child, right? My parents thought, okay, that's probably not the best situation for us to be in. And like many other people, they left. So we actually ended up going to Israel because there's some Jewish ancestry in my family.
Uh-huh. And like, what were you like as a kid? Were you like your dad kind of sparked a little interest in computers for you? Were you like a technical kind of person into science, or more on the sports side, or what were you like?
Um, so it's kind of funny because yeah, he did spark that interest in me, and I kind of followed it for a while. And actually, I think maybe in my teens or late teens, um, I actually decided that was boring, and I decided, and that was part of the reason, because I was basically on a path to become an engineer, a developer, right? So like I started coding a bit, very simple things like basic and stuff like that very early on, and I kind of did this for a while, and I thought that's not the way for me to be the most creative, and which wasn't, this is not actually true, right? Just anybody's listening, it's no, you can be really creative as an engineer. But back then I thought like I want to be a designer, I want to be more of an artist. And that actually led me to the I pirated 3D Studio for DOS. I don't know if I should say. I think it's been long enough ago, and it's probably okay to say this. That was like 25 years ago or more.
Yeah, I think you're fine.
I hope I'm okay. Yeah. So, and I started playing
So
with
what
like
did
with
3D
3D.
Studio do? What did it allow you to do?
Yeah, so like it actually allowed me to build like models of things, what I mean, and then even animate them a little bit. And I thought this was really neat. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I could make like little models of people or whatever, and have them kind of move around, and I decided I wanted to be in the sort of visual effects kind of gaming industry, right?
Mhm.
Computer games and stuff like that, because that's fun. So I actually did this for a little bit.
Were you doing any of these like classes in school, or were you self-taught?
Primarily, yeah, really self-taught, and everything. I again one of these things that maybe I shouldn't be saying, but I actually never finished high school. That was kind of that. Uh, and yeah, I just kind of got in. Even today, I would say, even this company, right? Like I've most of the things that I'm doing, I'm primarily learning them by doing them.
That's cool. I always have a bit of envy for people who sort of hit on what they want to do early in life and just kind of like know that path. Was there something that you recall about like 3D designs or anything in that period that sort of like where you knew like, yeah, I want to do this for the rest of my life?
Well, I mean, at the time, I think yes, but as obviously ended up, I'm not doing that. I haven't done this in a long time, right? So it's not, I haven't, I definitely would not say I figured out my path early on. I thought I had, right? But then over my career, it changed many times, in fact, right? And I think what I'm doing now, being a founder, being a CEO, is what I want to keep doing, right? For maybe the rest of my life, but we'll see how that goes. Um, but I guess to go back to your question, I think yeah, like it was the kind of creativity, the expressiveness that I was looking for, right? I was able to essentially create a thing, right? Even if it's a model or a little animation that runs on the screen, but I could create it on my own, right? I could learn how to do it, and I could do it, and then I could make a little video and show it to other people, and I'm like, hey, this is a thing I just created, right?
Yeah,
And that's what really attracted me to that.
very much like crypto today. That's a huge possibility. But let's stay with this for a second. So did you start building websites, or what did you do with this like newfound design passion?
Yeah, so I did like I said, I wanted to get into gaming, and I actually did. And I spent maybe a year, maybe a little bit, maybe a year and a half in that, and I realized that, while me kind of alone on my own, I could create things and just do them. But as I'm sure you know, like in a gaming company, a large gaming company, especially if you start at a kind of very junior role, you don't get like you don't have creativity. You just do what you're told to do essentially, and like
Yeah.
you have very little input into a big title. So I kind of found this out after a while, and I realized that's not for me. And at the same time, exactly as you said, I realized that as opposed to like a game, right? A video game is a huge production, right? It's hundreds of people and millions of dollars budget. But a website, I can actually build myself, right? I can just do a website. I taught a little bit of like backend. I learned how to set up a MySQL server and this kind of stuff, and mostly front and how to design like a page. And I started doing that, and I realized, yeah, I can do that thing end to end, right? So like I can do it, and I can publish it, and it can be online, and other people can see it just on my own. And I started like freelancing to do that, and eventually I got a job doing that, like building websites, and it was called a webmaster back then,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. A
That's
webmaster. I remember that.
it's a cooler name. I'm kind of, it's too bad we don't have this anymore. It's a cooler name than a front end developer or web
Yeah. Well,
designer
you've got a
today.
lot of different masters. You got a dungeon master, webmaster,
Yeah, right. That's
all
kind of
very
fun.
creative. So
Yeah.
what year are we in here? Is this like the mid 90s or something?
No, it's like late 90s, early 2000s, I guess. Yeah, so like early 2000s kind of range. Yeah.
Okay. Um, and then, so just what was next for you? Like, did you enjoy, doing the website stuff? Was it creative enough for you?
I did. I enjoyed it, and also in the meanwhile, as I was kind of finding my career path, I guess, my family also moved from Israel to Canada, and I spent some time in Canada, and then I actually kept on moving. They stayed. They're still in Montreal today, but I kept on kind of moving, and I ended up in the U.S. eventually. Um, but yeah, I built a bunch of websites essentially as a freelancer. Then I got hired into my first startup, and I ended up being working a lot in e-commerce actually, um, which was good, which was interesting, and I ended up maybe after probably 7 or 8 years, like maybe 2008, I think. Um, I'm sure you can check my profile on LinkedIn, whatever. I probably got the date wrong, but somewhere in 2008, I was already in the role of like, I think a creative director. So I had a team of folks I was working with. I was already a manager, right? I had some designers I was kind of managing, and copywriters and that kind of stuff. And it was a lot of fun actually. But I think at that point I also started to get a lot more curious about how does a company work? How does a business function, right? And not just like aesthetically creating things, but now how do they actually, like, how do we make revenue? I mean, like, how do we make profit? How are we able to pay people
Yeah.
and all this kind of stuff? And that led me to my, I guess, next career change after that, which was a product manager. Right. So
Okay.
like I didn't starting companies just yet then, but I felt that, if I could, I started thinking, what's a role that I could find that would allow me to have essentially more visibility into how like an organization functions and have some impact on this. And I realized that was a lot more kind of data driven than so that little spark of kind of computer interest still remained, right? And I was very interested in data. And I thought combining all these things maybe sounds like a product manager. And so I
Mhm.
kind of switched gears, and I also switched industries. So I went from e-commerce to fintech, um, and I did that on purpose because I kind of looked at the sort of financial industry, and this is like 2008, 2010, right? I'm like, it's terrible, right? The products are awful in a sense, not just the UX, but like the products, nobody can make sense of them, right? Nobody can use them, whether that's individual or businesses. They're difficult to use. They're just not good. And I thought, okay, so like technology is going to come in, and internet's going to come in and like disrupt all that and change all that, and it's going to be a completely different and much better experience for everybody, and I want to be a part of that change.
Yeah.
And that didn't quite happen as quickly as I thought it would.
Yeah, I would argue it still hasn't really happened. Did
Exactly. Yes.
the financial crisis of 2008, that area, like that era, did that color your views as well?
Yeah, I think so, right? Because that's probably a big part of where I thought the industry was so terrible, right? And then the flip side of that, I was thinking, well, if it's so bad now, right? And now we have technology, right? We have internet, we have all these things. It has to change, right? Right? And and it will change with technology, right? It will change for the better, right? And just like you said, it's on the way. I think it's just starting to get there now, honestly. Like it's very far from there.
Yeah, it's really
So
interesting.
yeah.
I keep hearing this sort of echoed in other stories and people I'm talking to, where the internet it disrupted so many industries and took down the barriers to entry to so many things, but finance really was not one of them. It still stayed this kind of walled garden area where the products were opaque and the banks like it that way because they can make more money. If you don't know what the price is of something, then the bank gets to tell you what the price is, which is really great if you can swing that. So then I think what a lot of people like yourself included came out of that experience with was just like, I want more transparency. I want more control. And just like, I want to feel like I'm actually in charge of what I'm doing with my money.
That's exactly it. And I think back then I was not sort of personally yet at a point where I thought I could drive the change, right? But I thought it would happen, and I just wanted to be a part of it as well, right? I thought somebody else is going to come in and do that, and I just kind of I want to come along with them, right? Because I do think it's important. I do think it's impactful to basically everyone, right? Money matters to every person, right? In one way or another. And so I just wanted to be a part of that. And other people, maybe Satoshi at around the same time, were thinking similar things, and they did more at the time. Um, but yeah, I felt strongly about it then, and I actually feel strongly about it now, right? The part of the reason why I started Conduit, is because of that. And we'll probably get to that later. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
jump
Well,
ahead too
what
far,
was your
but
first,
yeah,
when did you first come across Bitcoin?
good question. I think probably around 2015, I think. So a little bit later, right? I wasn't aware of it super early on, but yeah, I think I was introduced to it by somebody who actually gave me probably a a Bitcoin actually, right back then,
Yeah.
which was already maybe several $100s. I lost it since, by the way. I don't have it anymore, but
So many
I
people have
lost it.
that same story.
I know, right? It's yeah, but that got me thinking, right? So at first it didn't seem like much, and I was like, "What is this thing?" And what does it do? But I think around the same time, so I kind of in my I guess professional life, I kind of moved from fintech actually into banking in the meanwhile, right? So by that point, I think I was already working, or maybe was soon to start working in a bank here in Boston called
Mhm.
Eastern Bank, Eastern Labs. They had this innovation kind of division thing going, and and the reason I did this is like having the fintech experience of trying to build on top of bank, right? Because I'm sure everybody knows, right? Who's listening to this probably the way a fintech works is like you have a sponsoring bank under you, right? Like you have like the actual deposit, the actual money sitting in a bank somewhere, right? And so, and I realized, well, kind of again, maybe following the same theme, you can't really actually build a fintech exactly the way you want because you're always constrained with what that bank allows you to do, right? And it's fairly actually restrictive, right? Your checking account, your savings account, your debit card, like they're very set. You know what I mean? There's very little that you can change about them, really. And I thought that maybe if I can sort of get deeper into this, right? Get deeper into the stack and like maybe I can figure out a better way to work with this, right?
Yeah.
So I realized that no, the short answer is no. And like
Well, yeah, it brings to mind for me, like what was so fascinating about like Ethereum and Bitcoin to a lesser degree was that it's not only a technology and a platform, it's a financial instrument. It's got value embedded right into it, and is that is a vital part of the whole application. So you don't have this like separation of like, oh, here's the fiat money rails and here's the banking infrastructure computer rails. With crypto, it's all part of the same thing.
Yep. That's That's exactly right, and that's why I realized, maybe not right away, but I think maybe around 2017 or 2018, early 2018, I kind of came to that conclusion basically, right? I was like, well, you're kind of really struggling to do something on top of this existing sort of legacy infrastructure, right? Like you're like the things that we were kind of working on with the bank, I think they were written the year I was born, right? They haven't aged any better than I have, honestly, right? So so I thought crypto, exactly like you said, is a way for us to build new things, right? Without this restriction, without this constraint, we can just create new products, and not just, and have them be more useful, right? More kind of valuable. And again, I think in 2017 that wasn't yet the case, right? With crypto, it was very speculative at the time. You had ICOs and you had lots of scams and lots of crap like that. And thankfully that died down, which is good. But now I think we are getting to that point, right? Finally, like finally.
So what was there something like a project or a protocol or anything like that in DeFi and in the blockchain space that really kind of set your imagination going and let you like realize that, yeah, this is the direction I want to go and I want to do something like what they're doing and it's time to go out on my own?
Yeah, I think so. The job, the role that I've had before starting Conduit, I was the head of product at a company called Eco, right? And they're doing really great things. They're an amazing company, and I think that is exactly the point where the products, what Eco does, is very easy for a person, for a consumer, for a user to understand, right? Like as a user of the app, you don't need to know what Ethereum is, what are gas fees, how do they work, what's a stable coin. None of that is hidden. You can learn all about this, right? But you don't need to figure this out on your own. What you can do is you get the app, you can use it very quickly, very seamlessly, and you get 5% interest on your dollars, and this is great. People love it, and for a good reason, right? That's what I mean by a useful product, where I'm like, this is the value in this, the usefulness of it comes out of the fact that there is no learning curve, right? You can just take it up and use it, and it's better than your existing bank, right? It's like 100 times better, and like if you just count the
Yeah,
interest or
so tell
whatever.
us real quickly, what does Eco do? What is the function there of the app?
Yeah, so Eco, and essentially, if you download the app, it looks very much like any checking account, any bank account, or a neobank, right? You download the mobile app, you can deposit dollars into it, you see your balances in dollars, you can spend your money on Amazon and have a card with rewards and all these kind of normal things. But as opposed to your normal kind of Bank of America or Chase account that gives you like 0.06% interest or something like that, with Eco you get like 5, right? So that's a huge difference, and that's what I mean by value, right? And the way that it works under the hood is your US dollars are converted into stablecoin USDC, right? And there's this whole process of it being lent out and whatnot, getting interest on that, and then passing it to the user. So the whole point is that this is great. It was not the easiest thing to build, right, on the back end of this, and I thought that access to DeFi, which is what essentially enables it, right? So like DeFi protocols like Compound, like Aave, like Anchor, and many other ones, right? They enable this thing, but they're really difficult to access, right? Like if you're a quote unquote normal person on the street, go figure this out, right? You can't. I mean, you can eventually, but not right away. And I thought this is a barrier, right? Because if you look at DeFi today, there's probably something like 4 million wallets that are active in DeFi, which is a tiny amount, right? It's a tiny amount of kind of participation. And a way to break that, like a way to get that number to 40 and 400 million and 4 billion or whatever, is to kind of remove that complexity away, right? That's, I think, from hopefully I'm making some sense, but this is the core of what I'm kind of getting at, is like the values in removing the complexity, right?
And that's
Getting
what
rid
you've
of
done it with Conduit, correct?
That's right. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's exactly what we're getting at. Like we're abstracting a lot of this complexity of, and we're not retail focused, right? So Conduit is B2B, right? And like we're helping other companies, other neobanks build these products, which they can be whatever they can be, right? I'm not even going to tell them what to build, right? They're going to come up with their own concepts of that. But my job is, the way I see it, at least our job is to make it easier for them, and so that they can make it seamless for their users, right?
Yeah.
And like the whole goal is that.
And let's just back up real quick so people understand, like, well, how can you get 5% interest with an eco account where a bank is paying you, like you said, it's got a zero in front of it, right?
Yeah,
The way I
two
understand it
zeros
is
actually.
once you convert dollars into digital assets, you can go, and some people will, first of all, there's a lack of dollars in the system. So if you can like lend out stable coins, you can get a very high interest rate on that lending. So let's say somebody will pay you 12% to get those stable coins, so that you can then go back to the person who has the eco account and give them 5 and keep 7 for yourself. And then there's other ways of investing that garner yield. Do I have that correct?
I think, yeah, the basics of it are there, and I'm not going to necessarily get into specifically what Eco is doing, but there are other companies that are apps. They're fairly similar, right? You can think of Donut or whatever. But yes, there's a sort of similar kind of concept across all of them, right? Which is exactly what you described. Um, there is there's a high demand of, especially of stablecoins, other assets as well, but primarily stablecoins, right? Because they're stable, right? They're pegged to the dollar in various ways.
Yeah, they're kind of like digital dollars, but not exactly.
Exactly, but right, but like they're able to move a lot faster, right, than real dollars in many ways. They're instantaneous almost. You can move them between exchanges. You can use them for various things. A lot of the use case, like why are people borrowing these things, right? Who are the borrowers that are ready to pay, these 12% or whatever interest rates? A lot of them are, primarily using it for trading use cases, right? So like these are
Right.
maybe hedge funds or very, very large traders that need to get access to these assets, and that's a quick and relatively easy for them to do it. And that's what's driving the demand, right? Because like you said, there's not enough of a supply, right? So
Right.
this is the wide opinion is because they have the demand, and there's not enough of supply of stable coins to bring in.
Yeah, it's really funny to
So
think that, like, even today, there's a lack of fiat currencies in digital form, so that there is this supply imbalance making all of this stuff so valuable.
yeah, I mean, yes, essentially yes. And then there are, not just a lack, I mean, there are really no fiat currencies in digital forms until we maybe have CBDCs. There are essentially like proxies or approximations, which are stablecoin, right? So what happens with a stablecoin, if you look at something like USDC, you still have the fiat that's sitting in a bank account, right? And then you have the
Right.
token that represents that same dollar, but now you can actually move the token faster, easier, cheaper, and all these sort of things.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just never enough of them because most of the money supply, most of the fiat is, well, it's not, it's not paper, but let's say it's more analog, right? It's actually like, it's most of the money, by the way, it's not, it's also digital. It's just sitting on like an AS400 mainframe that runs like a COBOL software. This is where your actual fiat money is. You think I'm joking, I'm not, right? And
Right.
that thing is hard to access. You can't move it, right? It's very difficult. And so like the real digital dollar is a stable coin, yes.
Do you worry that, like, some of these interest, bearing accounts are susceptible to, like, it's not like a run on the bank. It's not quite the same effect, but a lot of them are going through a centralized app, or a centralized company, and there's very little transparency there about, like, what are the actual assets you have on hand and what are you investing in, and do you worry about that? Like, it hasn't happened too much that I'm aware of. I think BlockFi might have had some issues, but I can't think of too many. And I certainly am not implying that it's a systemic risk or anything like that, but I just wonder what you feel about, like, if retail customers or people coming into DeFi have enough information to, like, judge the risk of doing this.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk, right? There's no question that it is a risk, and it is fairly opaque, right? And then if you're brand new, that that you're trying to come into the space. That's actually one of the problems that we essentially solve for, which is, you're right, there's just not enough information up front. You can do your research, right, and you'll figure it out, and hopefully at least you'll figure it out and you'll come to your own conclusions. But there isn't just a simple way for you to say, that one's fine, that one's a little bit riskier and whatnot, right? So, maybe I can get even more specific about this, right? So, like, if you look at USDT Tether, right, which has been around for a long time, I think it's the oldest stable coin, and like with them, it's a little bit less clear. They've produced some audits, they've produced some reports, and they're claiming that the backing is, I think, around 70%, maybe a little bit less, right, of the value of Tether in cash and cash equivalents.
I think 70% cash, 30% other stuff like government bonds, commercial paper, things like that.
Exactly. So there's kind of a couple of issues with that. And one is, like, first of all, how reliable are these audits? There probably are, right? But like, there's no real independent third-party verification, right? One thing. And then secondly, okay, so what you're telling me now is essentially only 70% of the value is kind of protected, and the 30 is actually volatile, right? So there's some risk there inherently, right? But then there are other ones, right? You look at something like USDC, for example, and that's a bit different, right? It's similar concept, obviously, but the money is kind of, it's more, they have produced audits by Thomson Reuters and a bunch of other ones, and the money is in US banks, it is FDIC insured, right? So like, there's more visibility there. But just like you're saying, if you're coming into this brand new, do you know the difference? Not necessarily, right? And so that's what we're doing. Like, we're using USDC, right, for that reason, because it's more transparent, it's more kind of open about this. So that's what we're using it. But if you're starting from scratch, it's hard for you to decide.
Yeah. And I believe I'm correct, you're not operating in the United States right now, right? Because the regulatory outlook is still murky. But what countries are you working in right now with Conduit?
Yeah, so we're not yet. We will be very soon in the US, but we actually started in Latin America. So I think Brazil was the first country where we went live. Now we also have Argentina, Colombia, Chile, and in Mexico as well. And then we've gotten quite a bit of inbound interest from Africa. So we've added recently Nigeria and Kenya too. And I think there are obviously a lot of differences between all these places, but there's also one commonality, which is, like, if you think about their local currencies, their local fiat currencies in all of these places, they're highly inflationary, right? I mean, we're experiencing inflation here in the US right now, obviously, and it's quite painful for most people. But you look at something like an Argentinian peso, for example, and they've had 52% inflation over last year against the dollar, right? So like, over in a year's time, you lost half your money, which is not, like, you're not having a good time,
That's one way to put it.
Right. And so what a lot of people are looking for in all of these countries is, can I get out of my local currency and can I get into something that's more stable, right? And then, when you make the comparison, a dollar, even if it may seem kind of volatile and inflationary to us, right? By comparison, it's actually more stable. And so, but they don't usually have the ability to buy dollars, for example, directly, right? So stable coins is a good alternative. And then if you can get yield, if you can get interest on that stable coin, that's a great inflation hedge, essentially, right? So people across the world in these kind of developing economies, they really want access. And this is what we like. Again, this is really at the core of what we do, right? We allow them to access these things without having to go through the barrier of, like, now I have to learn about this, now I have to understand this. How do I even get like a digital wallet? What's a seed phrase? Like, how does any of this works? It's, like, if you're worried about your family's income, right? Like, you're not gonna go and learn, get a crash course in blockchain, right? That's not what you need. You just need access to a better product, better service, and that's what we're powering. Not directly.
What you guys are doing at Conduit is, in these countries, you're working with like financial firms or startup banks to then offer this to their existing customers, where they don't, like, the interface is easy to use, and they don't, like you're saying, have to dig in there and get their hands dirty with like a key, a private key, a public key, all that stuff.
Exactly. So exactly, like we're not going direct to every single, like all these retail users, right? We're going to, maybe they're already using, let's say, a remittance app, like a mobile app that has like, Venmo-like functionality or whatever, or the local startup bank or whatever it is, right? That doesn't really matter to us. And we can enable that company to actually give that type of service to its customers. And I think everybody benefits, right? Like the end user benefits because they have access to something that's better than their current bank account. Company benefits, and so do we, right? And that's
Are
we're
you
trying
getting
to
any
build some sort
pushback
of
from the
product.
governments themselves? Because in a sense, you're kind of undermining their currency, by allowing their citizens to sort of circumvent it. Is there any pushback that
Well,
you're getting, or what's it like? And I know it's probably all different, but what's that been like?
right. So I wouldn't say we're probably not big enough for any government to actually notice us yet, right? So I wouldn't say that. But also, in every country where we operate, um, we work with the local legal experts, with the local regulatory experts to make sure that everything we're doing is always above board. So we'll never do anything that's illegal in any way, or even shady, or even in the gray area. Right? We want to make sure that everything that we're doing is completely, as I was saying, completely above board, completely kosher, so to say. And to that end, right, sometimes we have to build, I would say, restrictions, right? So for example, in many countries in Latin America, one thing that we built is essentially a closed loop system where a customer, let's say a customer deposits from account A, they cannot then withdraw into a different account, especially not into a different wallet, into a different country or anything like that, right? So the money has to always come back into the same place where it originally came from, right? Which is, that's both for like anti-money laundering reasons, but that's also for the reason that you mentioned, right? So there's not like currency leaving the country.
Yeah.
It's essentially kind of being lent to us. It makes some money and then it comes right back, except now you have a little bit more of it than you did before, right?
Yeah.
And so now you can actually benefit the local economy because now you can like, maybe afford that car that you wanted to buy or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how have you, you're working in all these different countries and jurisdictions. What's the regulatory approach been like in those different regions, and how would you compare it with what the US is doing and where things seem to stand here in America?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, it's very different, kind of case by case, right? So like different countries obviously have very different approaches to this, and like I was saying, we basically try to figure out on a case by case basis. And sometimes we decide maybe it's not worth it for us, right? Like maybe the environment is too restrictive, or we can't operate in the way that we need to, so we just don't do that, right? We don't go into that country. We do this research up front, right? We obviously do this, like I was saying, find local experts, which is not easy because you don't like the regulations not always clear enough for there to kind of be local experts in it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's happening right now. But we always try to find somebody local. I think it's really key for us, both in terms of figuring out the regulation, and actually, by the way, in terms of sales as well, right? So we always want to have a person that's there on the ground and understands not just the letter, but also the spirit of the local kind of law and how how does the local government agency see these things, not just in written, but maybe what kind of interviews does the head of the local securities agency give on TV, right? And what does they say about that? So we always want to understand this locally. And I would say, just generally speaking, a lot of these countries, they're a little bit, in a sense, behind the US. They don't have as much regulation, but that's actually a good thing because it allows for more things to be built. But they are following, they're watching very closely what the SEC and the other government agencies doing in the US. They're probably going to emulate essentially what's happening here.
You must be paying attention to what's going on in El Salvador. Are you guys working there yet?
Not yet, but yes. So El Salvador, there's a country in Africa as well. Actually, just I think recently, last week, also started accepting Bitcoin as legal tender. So there's a lot of movement in that. That is great. I think a lot of people may see this initially as sort of gimmicky and whatnot, but you know what? That's a start. Like you start somewhere and then it develops from there, and you have to start.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Fascinating to see that. Well, Kirill, thank you so much for being here. It's been a great honor talking to you and a real pleasure. All the best with Conduit and good luck there. And again, thanks a lot for coming by. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers.